if a man shall lose pace with his companions, perhaps it is because he hears the sound of a different drum. And we've all heard this, really, our whole lives, right? March to the sound of your own drummer. But I think so few of us have either ever heard that drummer or hear him or her on a daily basis, because society drowns out our beat and tries to get us to march to the social beat, which is the common thing, this conform, conform, conform. And it's hard to find a place where you can kind of be quiet enough to hear your own beat and where people support it. Right? And we've seen it clearly at Burning Man, where people support everyone's unique experiments and idiosyncrasies, and all of that is celebrated. And then, hopefully this will be the digital place where people can feel, that free and that supported, and can go and express themselves.
It's interesting, because I think that the words of be yourself, march to the beat of your own drummer. It's like no one hears that and goes, "Oh my gosh, that's such an innovative idea."
Right.
But it wasn't until well into my late 20s, early 30s that I really even recognized that there were beats other than the ones that I'd been exposed to my whole life. And as the internet, when I started to submerge myself in the internet, was like, oh my gosh, there are all these other beats. There's all these other paths.
Right.
And so I think that what we both became clearer and clearer seeing, a lot of people, as the social media, which is becoming synonymous with the internet, is starting, people are feeling more and more restricted to the kind of beats.
Yeah.
And so, when you said Anybeat, it was like,
yeah, that's how it felt.
Yeah.
It was like instantly, as soon as I saw the name, I knew that was it.
And I love, once you also shared the quote, then the kind of this gravity pulling into the philosophy of Emerson and Thoreau, recognizing that, oh my gosh, here are these American philosophers dealing in the same subjects that we often go to the East for,
right,
or New Age stuff, and here is this, like, basically the roots of our society,
yeah,
that we've almost covered up with marketing and techno crap, and it's just there for us to rediscover.
Right. Yeah, it was amazing, and since then, as you know, I've rediscovered Thoreau, and I'm rereading Walden. It's still tough.
Was Walden.com available?
It's still tough to read Walden, but yeah, there are, well, these are timeless issues, right? These are things that have always been important to the human race, to go and find yourself and find others like you and have meaningful conversations. And that's really the thing. I think that, as I was telling Jason Calacanis, which is the thing that we simply can't hear our beats. There's so much message that is being thrown at us, and we're drinking from a fire hose of all these sources, that it's impossible to have these conversations. And so what we're discussing is what we had for lunch, or retweeting, how much RAM the next iPad's going to have. But
yeah, that's, I think, one of the scary things is that when our media and our marketing is so intertwined,
right,
then the dialogue, the beat, becomes this mesh of news and press release and marketing and new products, and that's what we talk about.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's a dystopian future.
Yeah. Well, and then on platforms that do allow us to communicate with each other, like Facebook, because we're using our official names, and because everyone we've ever known is there, including our employers and our pastors and our friends and family, we dramatically edit ourselves, and we tend not to have deep, meaningful, philosophical conversations about the world. And I think the reason that I think this is so compelling to people so far is that with that pseudonym, you can be free again.
Right.
And you can start having, that's why we're having these kinds of discussions. I mean, people are talking about philosophy and music and religion and, you know, everything, all the taboo subjects you could possibly ever bring up on, well, music not it, but philosophy, religion, sex, all those things we don't discuss on Facebook very much.
One of the coolest things that I've seen already happen is the taboo on affection and connection. I mean, there's a group, when the first group started, was hugging a stranger, and you know, meanwhile on Facebook, I've been a part of a dialogue that someone was having where they had this amazing experience happen in the workplace, had the instinct to hug this person that helped them, and knew that that was inappropriate.
Right.
And that's, I think, kind of how people feel on Facebook. You know, that there's a certain way that we interact with our coworkers and friends and on the internet, and it involves, as you said, the editing. And so to see this kind of conversation and people sharing these experiences of their day, and highlighting these experiences that were outside the acceptable realm of vulnerability, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, behind some of them, some people are very comfortable sharing that vulnerability. Clearly, I don't worry if somebody calls me names or questions my anything. But there are people who can have their corporate power in their normal life, and then share about this experience they had in an elevator where they were all trapped and they were all crying by the end, and this incredible bonding experience. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if we have a place where we, one, feel comfortable sharing it, two, encourage each other to not only share these experiences, look for them in our lives. I mean, I was like getting chills. I'm getting chills even thinking about it. This was, I'm very, I'm encouraged.
I know. So, rangers are volunteers that are members of the community that have special rights. And so they are, you know how those, at Kroger they used to wear these little buttons, the supermarket, I'm here to help? That's basically what they are. They're little buttons. We've got these little stars. That's what they mean. They mean they're here to help. And so if you run into trouble and there's, think of them as they're like the cops, but they don't carry guns. They've got some special rights. They're here to help you. They're volunteers, so you got to treat them well. And they just have some special powers to be able to put people into timeout, just like we used to have as kids. If you're not behaving right, you may be put into a timeout. To block accounts, all kinds of things that you'd need in a public place. But they're folks just like us.
Right.
Well, in fact, they're literally folks like us because both you and I are rangers. Mm-hmm. Mighty Morphin.
You've said that this is not a social network, or more than a social network, it's an online community. What does that mean?
Right. I think social networks are tools that let us map our existing relationships, our social graphs as they're called, right? And so I invite my friends and family and business associates, and we all identify each other into the social graph, and that's why it's called a social network. It's a network of things, a mesh. And that's awesome. As you know, I mean, you and I use Facebook all day, every day. It's awesome for that, because I love to keep in touch with my friends and family. And business. I mean, I do a lot of business on Facebook. But that's not what we're building here, right? We're building a community, a global community, where people can show up. There's a directory, so you can find people. There's a culture that you can approach people. In fact, you should approach people and say hello. That's the whole point. That's the point of this, is to meet the world, find people like you, have intimate conversations, hang out, fall in love, whatever it is. So I think that's the big difference. Well, I think when you bring tens of thousands of people into the desert and say, express yourselves, and by the way, while doing that, survive for a week, build a city, one that doesn't have any garbage cans, one that, while they have police, for the most part, police stay out of it, and live and enjoy yourselves. The city works, and so, and it works naturally. So I think that's the key. The key is to is to build a community where people have the same vibe and understanding. I mean, why is the desert not completely polluted? Because people care. Because they love it. Because they think it's an important thing for them, and they want to support it.
Right.
And that's it. I think that's all that's required. I think if you build it with intentions of that, and you let the community, you tell the community what it is, I think people support it.
And there's just continually been these examples of like, well, what do we do if, and like one of the things you've outlined in kind of the guidelines is no marketing.
Right.
We will introduce commerce and brands, within a framework that makes sense. But
Right.
at this point, no marketing to your fellow
Right.
members, fellow participants. And the model in the desert is because there's also no marketing, there's no commerce
Right.
between individuals. If someone approaches you,
Right.
you know that the traditional, the things you have to be afraid of in the default world, that, oh, here's somebody coming at me, what do they want?
Right.
You know that if you take out marketing and commerce, they just want to meet you.
Right.
And that awareness changes the dynamics of social interactions dramatically.
Right. Completely.
And that's just one example of how these desert dynamics, how do we apply that to a digital space?
Yeah.
I love that during your Calcanus interview, the tech aide guy, and he was Tyler. He brought up like, oh man, it's like those days when I used to be able to talk about religion in the AOL
Right.
boards,
Right.
and that how significant, and I think that a lot of people that were online a decade ago remembers how powerful it was to get in these discussions, whether it was an email list, whether it was a message
Right.
board, whether it was a chat room, where there's a bunch of people who were united based on passion in something, or
Right.
interest or curiosity, and then be able to dig into and question and even say things that maybe in 2 weeks you're like, no, you're right, I was wrong.
Yeah. Well, and I think in those days it didn't quite occur to us, or at least it wasn't culturally right to feel that the internet was a business tool.
Right.
And since then, we said it's a business tool, it's a business tool, it's a business tool. And so everyone's thinking about how do I use it for business. And I love using it for business. I wouldn't give it up for business. I think it's awesome. But again, that's not what we're building. We're building a place for people to use to socialize, to meet each other, a global public gathering place.
Right.
So yes, in that gathering place, we don't want members marketing to each other. We, of course, eventually will introduce advertisers into this, vendors. And we're going to be very cautious about how we introduce them. But they clearly belong. And by the way, it's really important to have those kinds of relationships, right? I mean, same thing whether it's in the desert or not. There are times that you need supplies, right? And none of these things ever happen without these businesses. By the way, we're employed by those businesses, right? We all want businesses to succeed on the service, but it has to be integrated properly.
And
that's right.
I mean,
and by the way, I don't think Facebook's done a very bad job at all with it. I mean, I think they've done a pretty good job of integrating businesses in it. But I think you can even do better than that.
And I think that it's because in the desert, there's this, I think, misconception that it is a commerce-less experience.
Right.
And it's that, no, you have to plan so that you do your commerce in a way that it doesn't impede on the intimacy of the face-to-face
Totally.
experiences.
Yep.
I mean, nothing that we have out in the desert wasn't bought at a store.
Right.
Right. It's just that we
Well,
know
some things, but yes, not most things.
most things. And so it's more that, okay, in the public square,
Right.
that's not the place for me to be buying or selling
Yep.
my wares. Does that mean those things never occur? Of course
No,
they
of
have
course
to
not.
occur,
Right.
because I'm not a self-sufficient farmer. Although maybe there's a discussion on how I could be one.
The next step is we're scaling our servers, right? Because the demand has been much greater than, not than we anticipated. We actually obviously felt it was going to be great, but it's good to see that it's for real. And so we're letting people in slowly. We're fixing a bunch of bugs. We're scaling up the back-end servers. So we'll let in more and more people. And then that'll go on for a couple of weeks. And then we've got a whole slew of features that we're going to start releasing. In the public square, in the directory, the question system, kind of a lot of those things start to get revamped so they can be more relevant when we have larger groups of people in the community. So they're going to be segmented by various things, give you ways to find the stuff that you want.
And let's plan on having a chat like this every once in a while.
I think we should do it all the time.
Okay.